Hey everyone, hope y'all are doing well. So this is my part 2 to my volume 8, volume 9 review, or you could just call it the volume 9 review because the last one was just pretty much a volume 8 itself review, or whatever you want to do. But yeah, this is going to be me talking about volume 9, the Knapsack Kid portion of the story and my thoughts on it. And yeah, just kind of give my review or just kind of throw out my thoughts on it, off the cuff because I just want to get it off my chest. It's just been something that I've wanted to talk about for a while. And yeah, so kicking everything off. So it starts off pretty well, going from volume 8 at the end of it to volume 9. Kicks off right when Sakuta meets the little Mai Sakurajima on Shichirigahama Beach, and this time not in a dream of what happened at the beginning of volume 8. And they have that little conversation between them two. It was kind of odd, her there, she seeming like she was lost or not really supposed to be there or whatever it was, and she was a little scared or reluctant to talk to Sakuta. But after Sakuta kind of, poked some questions or like talked to her a little bit more, she got a little bit more comfortable with him and thought he was a little bit funny. With the mystery behind the little Mai Sakurajima there in the very beginning, I thought it was something along the lines of, the Futaba sort of situation where Futaba, Rio, there's two Futabas that were around and stuff, but they couldn't really coexist at the same time in the same place. They could kind of coexist at the same time when it comes to, Sakuta speaking to this Rio Futaba, but he sees the other Rio Futaba somewhere. But then as soon as they, are supposed to collide and go into like the same location or whatever, one of them does not exist or whatever. They just don't exist around each other or something. And that was kind of the situation when it came to the little Mai Sakurajima thing, because after Sakuta and her were talking, I believe the big Mai Sakurajima came because they were supposed to meet on Shichirigahama Beach after the graduation. And then once she came, the little Mai Sakurajima disappeared. So we were kind of wondering, how does this adolescent syndrome kind of situation work? Whose is it? Is it Mai Sakurajima's adolescent syndrome, or is it something that has to do with Sakuta? And I'll be straight up when it comes down to it. We never really get a solid answer, I'd say, at least in my mind. Maybe I missed something and it was a lot more clear than what it needed to be or whatever, or it was a lot more clear than what it was set out to be. But there wasn't a lot of like very clear information on what the little Mai Sakurajima was. She was kind of like I guess like a gateway or something like that to go to a different world in a sort of a way. And she was always found on Shichirigahama Beach. And I feel like Shichirigahama Beach is a very big topic of conversation that I want to address at some point because everything happens there. So much of what happens in the Rascal Does Not Dream story is so focused on Shichirigahama Beach, or always occurs at Shichirigahama Beach. So I feel like that's like, I don't know, maybe it's something that gets addressed in the future or whatever it may be. Or maybe it's like, the Shichirigahama Beach or just the beach in general is just such a magical place or something. And it's like the place that, holds so many memories, or it holds, some of these crazy things that end up happening within the Rascal Does Not Dream story, or I don't know, so many cool things just end up happening there, or just mysterious, stuff. And throughout the story, we did get some hints as to what it could possibly be, but it was still open-ended. It still wasn't like a concrete, concluded sort of thing stating like, this is what it actually is of what the little Mai Sakurajima is at the end of the day. They kind of mentioned that this little Mai Sakurajima, I believe Mai Sakurajima, the actual older one, provided some DVDs or like tapes or something like that of her old acting roles when she was very much so younger. And Sakuta noticed that the way that she was acting in some of her roles or whatever was kind of how she acted when he saw the little Mai Sakurajima on the beach there. So the way she spoke and her mannerisms or whatever it may have been reminded him a lot of how Mai Sakurajima was in her acting roles there. So that was something that was a little bit weird there. So we don't know if it's like actual Mai Sakurajima or maybe her acting side of Mai Sakurajima or whatever it was. And then as well as Sakuta mentioning at some point of like her representing Sakuta's child side or something like that, and him, now like going towards growing up and things of that nature. But the little Mai Sakurajima was representing his child side. But the fact that it looked like Mai Sakurajima was to make him be more honest with himself, or just be more honest in general, because he can't lie to Mai Sakurajima. So that's kind of how he explained it before as well. So it was like something to help him grow up possibly, or leave that child side in the wayside or whatever it may have been. At least that's kind of how I interpreted it when they spoke about it and they kind of had that conversation, or he had that monologue about it. So jumping over to the main subject, the main focus of this story in this light novel, which was something that was very important that I thought that needed to be be addressed at some point, along with the whole Kaede kind of stuff. And that was with Sakuta's mom, because through the entirety of the series, she has been in the hospital because of Kaede's kind of adolescent syndrome thing kind of springing up, and her kind of having a nervous breakdown or whatever it was, her feeling like she wasn't a great mother, and things happening to her mentally that put her in the hospital at the end of the day there. So addressing this, one thing that did happen pretty soon after was that they were notified that she was getting better, and that she was given like the permission to be discharged to recover at home at that point, which was a big topic of conversation, a big thing that sprung up a lot of emotions on Kaede's side, on Sakuta's side, some uncertainty, some scariness on that side too, because of certain things that I will mention in the future right here pretty soon. But yeah, that was something that was very much so hot topic of conversation, very focused on in this story, led to a lot of things that were moving in this story, very high emotional things that did happen that I was glad that we did get to experience within this light novel. It was very much so a big reason as to why I love this light novel so much. One thing that I did want to mention before I carried on with the whole Sakuta mother stuff was that Mai Sakurajima introduced Sakuta over to her mother, actually, which was weird and nice to see at some point, because this was the first time that he's actually properly meeting Mai Sakurajima's mom, because in the first arc that we had with Mai Sakurajima, she kind of met him there when there were different circumstances there when Mai Sakurajima wasn't existing and things of that nature. It was a little bit of an awkward encounter that did happen at that point, so it wasn't like a proper introduction that did happen there. And then as well as I believe in the Dreaming Girl movie, when Mai Sakurajima ended up passing away, unfortunately, and then he runs into Mai Sakurajima's mother, who was crying and just sobbing and just unconsolable at that point, because her child passed away at that point. But they ultimately did a redo, so I don't know if that even counts at that point, but essentially Sakuta hadn't met her at this point. First time for him meeting her, and it was a nice little conversation that ended up happening there, a little bit kind of intense or heated in some sort of fashion, with Mai Sakurajima speaking to her mother. Sakuta also being a little bit nervous speaking to her mother, because he hadn't at that point before, of course, so he was very nervous, and it was an unplanned thing that was sprung up on him that he wasn't expecting. So yeah, he was very scared, and there were some things said that he didn't really know how to react to or how to phrase or respond to at some point. So it was a little bit funny there, but also sweet at the same time, because Mai Sakurajima voiced in some ways of how important he is to her, and how she handpicked him, and how special Sakuta was, highlighting that part of it too, which was really nice to see there. But also too, when Mai Sakurajima's mom kind of went away, they did highlight at some points Mai Sakurajima's growth. So Mai Sakurajima and her mother weren't actually on good terms at this point when they had this conversation. They hadn't squashed things just yet. They were still kind of both parties a little bit upset at each other of how things were going down, and not really talking to each other really. Later on after this, Mai Sakurajima did get some highlights of her growth and everything. They might not have been on super good terms, but she was fine seeing her and was fine with her coming to the graduation and everything. And Mai Sakurajima, I'm sure they'll kind of reconnect and maybe squash things a little bit later. Maybe that'll be a topic of conversation, or something that's a big plot point in the story going forward, of them apologizing to each other, or Mai Sakurajima's mom apologizing to her for the bad stuff that she did and taking advantage of her when she was younger and stuff, with the whole modeling thing. But like I said, with Mai Sakurajima's highlights of her growth, she was talking about how she realized what's important in this life, and she realized that if she wants to have a family in the future, she needs to learn how to be a family right now. So I'm assuming that she's gonna possibly, interact with her mother a little bit more, or try to, squash things at some point in the future, things like that. But, that conversation that they did have there was definitely a lot nicer than what I thought it was gonna be. They did kind of give us some insight as to, in a different perspective, as to when it came to all the stuff that they were doing. With Mai Sakurajima being a big star when she was younger, all the stuff that happened with, her having to travel and her doing certain things, staying up late at night, having all kinds of busy schedules and appointments and whatever things that were going on, and Mai Sakurajima getting very little time to go to sleep or whatever. She had to, sneak in sleep during little tight windows of time that she would have. But when Mai Sakurajima would have those tight little windows to actually sleep, did her mother actually get to sleep? She was, some of those times driving her places, or she was, having having to stay awake because she was her manager at that point, and she can't just, lay down and take a nap. She has a job to do. She has to take care of her daughter and take care of her, kind of like client at the same time. So she couldn't do some of those things and had to endure a lot and had to go through some stress and some tiredness and a lot of that stuff too. So I like that perspective that they gave us too, that her mother wasn't all bad. She was there for her daughter and took care of her. Going back to the adolescent syndrome side and everything kind of happening with the mother and things of that nature, Sakuta did notice something that was very strange that happened soon after he saw the actual little Mai Sakurajima again. He noticed that he had another scar, not the same like claw mark scar that he had on his chest before or around his shoulder or whatever it was, but he had a scar on his stomach that was kind of going off to the side, I believe they described it as. But yeah, he had a scar like that. It wasn't nearly as bumpy or like kind of gruesome as the other scar was, but it was very soft and felt like it like scabbed up and the scab fell off or whatever, but it felt very soft and it was kind of numb too at the same time. So he also showed that to Mai Sakurajima. She showed some great concern when it came to seeing that because she knew that, that wasn't normal. The thing with the little Mai Sakurajima wasn't normal. This part wasn't normal. And she was very, scared at the fact that, the last time this kind of thing happened, he ended up at some other timeline, ended up passing away because of this, because of the whole Shoko situation and everything. So she was scared that this might lead to something stressful happening, or maybe something might happen to Sakuta, and, that's her boyfriend, that's somebody that she loves. So she does not want to have anything happen to him. So seeing this on her side was very unnerving, and it was a kind of an uncertain thing that was going on that they were still trying to figure out what was going on with. And they kind of explained on what it could be for the scar as well, but it was still, again, with this one, I'd say a little bit more open-ended. It wasn't like a for sure thing that that's what it was. They just kind of explained like, oh, what it could be or what it could mean or something like that. That was one thing about this light novel that I'd say wasn't, I guess, the greatest, was that there was a lot of open-endedness to some of the things that were mysteries in the story. Like, they didn't really give us a concrete answer on what the scar was. They didn't really explain what the, actually concluded, or like it was an actual for sure answer on what the little Mai Sakurajima was. So that part of it was a little bit weird. And also another thing that I'd say what I wasn't like a super big fan of too was, I guess, the repetitiveness of some of the adolescent syndrome things. Like, Sakuta had that scar there, but he also had a scar before with the Dreaming Girl stuff, with the things that were related to him and Shoko, things like that. So he already had that kind of thing happen to him. And then as well as the kind of thing with the little Mai Sakurajima not being able to really exist at the same time as the other Mai Sakurajima being there or whatever, that was kind of like the same thing too. It had a different purpose, I'd say, but it was like both of them couldn't be there at the same time. So it kind of reminded me of the Futaba thing. That was another thing, like I said, that I wasn't like a super big fan of. I guess it seemed like it was a little bit more repetitive than what I was hoping for things to kind of be, but still there was a lot of good with this light novel as well. Touching back on Sakuta and his relationship with his mother, and Kaede and her relationship with her mother and just parents in general, and how they both felt about seeing their mother again. So once they got that call from their father talking about, how their mother's going to be discharged and be able to recover at home, and the mother wanted to see Kaede, I believe, in particular, because I'm assuming all the stuff that was happening with them, with her and going to school and all this stuff like that, everything that was a topic of conversation in the 8th light novel. But there's another reason behind that as well that I'll touch on right now. Before I get to that, Sakuta, it seemed like he was a little, I guess, like not super worried about it at first, but then at the same time, he had a conversation with Miwako, the counselor for Kaede, at one point, and they were discussing that as well, on how he felt about seeing his mother again. And it was a little bit worrisome because he didn't seem super excited about it, and he was very unnerved at it once he actually started thinking about it, and he started getting scared because he didn't really know what to think about his mother. He didn't really have much of a relationship with her. It was just, mother, child, whatever. He did his thing. He went to school. He woke up, she did chores and stuff like that, and she helped out around the house. Of course, she is a big part of what keeps that family going, and cleaning and cooking and doing all kinds of stuff and doing everything for them. But at the same time too, he's a kid, and he really didn't, I guess, appreciate her as much as he should have, or really got to know her. Kind of thinking of that stuff, everything he kind of started going over of like, oh no, I don't really know much about her. She's just my mom, you know, and that's all he really knows about her. And how Kaede is a little bit more closer to the mom and the dad than he really is at that point. So he was very scared to think of how this was going to play out. He was very nervous on how it was going to play out. What would he say to her at first? Like, hey, what's up? Like, been a long time or whatever. Like, how would it kind of go? And kind of propped a lot of things up and gave us some insight as to why things were happening the way that they were. Sakuta, you know, just kind of put his mom off the wayside. And it was a little bit surprising that this was happening at the time too, because he had been, I guess, so used to her just being in the hospital, and then him just taking care of other things, taking care of Kaede, you know, taking care of his schoolwork, going places with Mai Sakutajima and going on dates or whatever, or just, you know, hanging out with her, you know, hanging out with other friends or just talking to them, doing his normal everyday life stuff. But it was a problem that he pushed her off to the wayside and like almost forgot about her, or almost like pushed her out of his mind of like ever getting better, and didn't visit her or do things like that as well. So that was a big problem and something that caused for him to have the adolescent syndrome stuff that was going on happen. It was put on display too once they finally came to the day that they needed to go visit the mother. And you see that Kaede had a very heartwarming, you know, emotional reuniting with the mother at that point. Like in the build up to that too, when they were traveling over there, the anticipation was building, and it was a big thing that was supposed to happen. That at that point for myself, when I was reading it, I was kind of freaking out at the moment of like, oh, this is actually happening. I can't believe we're going to see the mother and have a conversation and see how she reacts and interacts with these characters, you know, her own children. Like I said, it was a pretty crazy thing that ended up happening at that point, because we had gone so long without really seeing her speak or things of that nature. It was put on display, like I said, how close Kaede was to her, because they had that heartwarming reuniting and emotional, you know, they were both crying, and it was just a great moment with them reuniting there. But here was a bigger problem that ended up happening because of it, and you could tell of what was happening as you're reading it when they were having these interactions and stuff within the house that, or apartment or whatever it was that they were in with the father, where he was staying at while the mother was there. But during this whole interaction, this whole day that was happening there, when they went there, Sakuta was there, but didn't really talk to the mom, which during the reading, when I did the live reading read-through thing, I remember I thought it was so weird that that was happening. Like in real time, I was like, why isn't he saying anything? Why is he not like having that heartwarming, nice reunion with his mother too? He should be speaking to her. He should be, you know, like sobbing as well, or whatever it may be, or just happy that she's out and getting better and things of that nature. But he wasn't. It's not that Sakuta wasn't happy that they were reuniting and having these nice moments. It was more so that he wasn't getting in on the nice moments, and he wasn't speaking to his mother and having that nice heartfelt reuniting with her too. And he was just there almost like an audience member to just watch Kaede talk to her mom and have a reuniting. Everything else was happening, and he was just, you know, helping, cooking, and just watching her. And, you know, at the same time too, they had a meal and everything. And also at the same time too, it was weird that the mother didn't talk to Sakuta either or acknowledge him. So that was a big thing that I noticed too, is that she didn't acknowledge him at all, and she wanted to see Kaede, and he didn't really acknowledge her, or he wasn't really trying to put in that effort to speak to her or do anything like that with her as well. I'm assuming because he was scared, and also because he was just watching Kaede have nice moments with the mom and everything, and they were talking a bunch and stuff, doing little crafts or whatever it may have been. I can't remember what they were doing, or cooking together or something along those lines. And then Sakuta ended up having to go. I believe Kaede spent the night there, and then Sakuta ended up leaving because he had to take care of Nasuno and he had school. But at some point, you know, he said bye to the mom, like said it verbally, but I don't know if she actually acknowledged it or heard it at all. I'm pretty sure she didn't. But yeah, that was just something that happened. That's all of really what Sakuta said to her, was just like bye after everything that happened during that time that they were there spending time together. It was nice that Sakuta's father came and, you know, told him that thank you for taking care of Kaede, or thank you for everything that you did and for coming. And it was nice, but it was very much so weird and not a great thing that he just left without saying much of anything to his own mom and her as well, not really acknowledging him while he was there as well. So yeah, he was pretty happy and thought that was normal, which was again a problem, that that's how things played out and that he didn't really talk to her, whatever. He thought it was good, and he was just so happy that they had a reuniting, mostly with Kaide and the mom and everything. But yeah, that was something that did happen there. And after he got some sleep and everything, woke up in the morning and went to school and noticed that he had another thing too, which was again kind of another repeating of adolescent syndrome thing happening again, which was Sakuta was non-existent to everybody pretty much in the world too. And yeah, so he had his own sort of like Mai Sakurajima moment or occurrence that happened there with him being non-existent. And it was because of the fact that the mother kind of like forgot about him because his own emotions and his own like I don't know if it was disinterest or whatever. I don't think it was disinterest. It was just like lack of acknowledgement or whatever, and trying to push her out of his own head and the worrisomeness of her situation out of his own head. Him doing that and kind of like trying to make himself forget about her or whatever, with the situation that she had going on there, made it to where his mother forgot about him and his existence, and therefore leading to the rest of the world forgetting about him existing as well. So that was, of course, a problem, and it was even worse than, I'd say, the Mai Sakurajima situation, because at least with the Mai Sakurajima situation that happened in, she had Sakuta there. She had him with her at that point to kind of help her throughout it. And as well as other people like still kind of remembered her. Like Kunimi remembered her at one point, and Futaba remembered her at one point too. But then slowly, as people, you know, ended up falling asleep the next day or whatever, they couldn't remember her anymore. So it kind of dwindled down for how many people actually remembered her. Sakuta still was there for her at that point until he ended up falling asleep too. At this point, it was straight up just nobody remembered him. He didn't exist to anybody. Mai Sakurajima, he even tried Koga, which was very concerning because I believe in the Dreaming Girl movie, when he kind of became non-existent at that point too, she was like the one person that ended up remembering him at that point. So when we saw that she didn't remember him, I was like, oh, damn, she's like his go-to that always remembers him. Like, it was weird that happened. So I was like, damn, he's really in deep shit now that she doesn't remember him. So of course, with all this stuff happening, he was freaking out, not sure what was going on, went to the mother's house again and was trying to figure out what was going on. I don't think they were there at that one point, or maybe they were, I can't remember. But he went and read her diary, the mother's diary, and saw all the things that she was writing in it, and saying how she wasn't a good mother and other stuff about Kaide, and mentioning other things. But there was one thing that wasn't mentioned throughout, like, I guess the entirety of that diary, and that was Sakuta. And that's how, you know, you came to conclusion of, you know, she forgot about him, like his existence was no more to her at that point or whatever, which I was freaking out about, and I was like getting kind of emotional of, and I was like, those aren't her like real emotions, right? And or this has got to be some sort of adolescent syndrome sort of thing that is causing for this to be happening. And then later on, he ends up hitting that point where he meets the little Mai Sakurajima, I believe, on Shichirigama Beach again. And that's when he gets like that gateway to a different world where, you know, he was stressed out and I think he was crying or whatever, but he was like very stressed and scared at the situation at hand where nobody could remember him. And he has all of these things going on, and he's, you know, stressed about how he shouldn't have went about things in the way that he did. He should have acknowledged his mom more. He should have been around her more, or he should have gotten to know her more during those times that, you know, previously happened when they were a happy family and stuff. Why doesn't he know her more? Why wasn't he connected to her the way that he should have been? He was going through all this stress and everything, and I think that he was getting to like a really bad place in his mind and everything, and stressfulness wise. So, and he ended up going to Shichirigama Beach, saw the little Mai Sakurajima, and then she ended up, you know, I think he passed out or something along those lines, or they went on a train together or like the railway together. And then when he woke up, he was, I believe, in his own bed or something like that. And then everybody could remember him. This world that he was in when he went here, or got teleported to, or whatever the heck it was, how it happened. It was supposed to be like an ideal, perfect world where nothing was wrong, where his mom never ended up going to the hospital. Kaede never got bad to that point where she had the adolescent syndrome. The bullying never got to that point because of something he did. And then as well as him still being friends with everybody that he was friends with before, him still dating Mai Sakurajima, the mother being okay, like I said, the father being fine, them all still living together, being a normal family, or at least as normal as what was the situation before. But yeah, he was in this situation because essentially he was like running away from the problem, kind of, where he wanted to be in this perfect world where everything worked out well for him and not kind of facing the problem at hand with his mother and needing to address that and needing to, apologize for, forgetting about her or for like pushing the thought of her or whatever to the wayside and things of that nature. So that was a big plot point within the story and how he needed to resolve it and how he needed to get out of this perfect world that they were in right now. Things seemed very nice at the time, but he had some conversations, I believe, in this world or whatever, in that perfect world with Ryo Futaba, and she kind of gave him that kick. I appreciate Ryo Futaba because she's very transparent with him and lets him know straight up of what he needs to do, or she helps him out so much. I've said it in previous videos, but she's like very real with him. And she did this and kind of gave him a kick in the butt to let him know that he's being a scaredy cat or whatever. He's running away to this perfect world instead of facing his problems head on like he should be, like the actual Sakuta that we all know would usually do. So she gave him that reality check there and let him know. She was very upfront and real with him in that situation. And she let him know too, like, you did the same thing with me. She had that situation with Kunimi where she needed to, confess her feelings and confront those. And Sakuta was the one that kind of gave her that push and like kept telling her, you need to do this. You need to confront your feelings about this guy. Sometimes friends just need that little kick in the butt from actual friends that, are looking out for you and need you to kind of confront those things that you're dealing with, confliction wise, whatever it may be. So I appreciate that they're both very good friends to each other and that Futaba did that for him. But yeah, he realized all the wrongdoings that he had. Or before I even jump over to that, I believe at this point too, it was such a weird sort of world or whatever that Sakuta, never needed to throw away his phone. So he had a cell phone in it, which was a little thing that threw me for a loop because I was like, what the heck? We're so used to Sakuta just being disconnected from the internet, disconnected from, phone communication, things of that nature. And yeah, he had a phone in this world because things never got that bad to the point where he needed to throw away his phone. But at the same time too, he needed to find a way how to get back to his own world. And I believe, he needed to find the little Mai Sakurajima because he realized that she's kind of like the gateway or whatever going to Shichirigahama Beach. And she's like the gateway to get back possibly to the world that he needs to be in. And he realized that he, like I said, shouldn't have treated his mother in that way, shouldn't have pushed the thought of her to the wayside to cause for, just for him to think everything's okay and stuff like that, not think about the stressful situation at hand. And another thing that did happen while they were in the midst of this perfect world was that Sakuta ran into that Ikumi Yakagi girl that is very prevalent in the 11th light novel. Apparently in this world, she went to Minagahara High. So previously in the original world, she didn't go to Minagahara High and she was, I believe, going to a different school or whatever it may have been. But she is in Minagahara High now in this school that they're currently in. And it is very heavily hinted that she likes Sakuta and she has a crush on him or whatever. It was very weird to see that in this world it was a little bit different and now she's at Minagahara High. But yeah, that was something that happened, as well as the mother as well, Sakuta and his mom having conversation, a normal, somewhat normal conversation during this time in the perfect world because she's not in the hospital. They can actually do that now, and her very much being surprised at the fact of how Sakuta is responding and how he's like thanking her and being, more proper and like trying to have a little bit more of a conversation with her and things like that. So she's very surprised and was like, oh, you never say thank you or whatever. Things that would have been like, oh yeah, just bye or whatever, something like that. So she was surprised at the fact that some of the things he was asking, some of the things he was saying, which tells a lot of how he was towards his mother before, which kind of sucks on how that situation kind of was there with him and the mom. He ends up going to Shichirigahama Beach, seeing the little Mai Sakurajima there, and kind of confronts her, kind of possibly being like the inner workings of Sakuta on, wanting to go back to the other world and to fight for his mom and apologize to the mother and making things right, because she was asking him like, why do you want to leave? Like, this world is really nice, right? And he was like, no, like he thinks that this world is great, but he needs to resolve some of these things with his mother. He wants to go back to the original world where the, actual Mai Sakurajima is, where all of his friends are, where Kaede is. So he wants to go back and fix things and be the Sakuta that he has always been and stuff. So not running away from his problems, because it's just going to cause for further issues down the line, I'm assuming, you know, how kind of you would assume it would. Eventually, the little Mai Sakutajima takes him back over there to that world, and Sakuta is kind of searching for certain things of what he could do to feel normal again, to have his existence kind of pop back up. He went to school as he would normally, and he was like on a baseball field or something, just walking around late at night, I believe, at the school, which is a little weird too, because he's at school at night or something. I can't remember what led to that. Eventually, Mai Sakutajima ends up finding him. So I thought this moment was freaking awesome when it did happen. Somebody, I believe, mentioned it to me too, like how she was very important in this light novel, of course, because it's like somewhat Mai Sakutajima related with the Knapsack Kid, but she is awesome. I love Mai Sakutajima, and I thought she had done so much in the story before, but even more so with this light novel, how important she was. There's one thing that I forgot to mention earlier, was that there's a lot of cute moments between Mai Sakutajima and supporting moments from her with Sakuta. And one of those things being that, like I said, that she was showing a lot of growth and showing how much she loves Sakuta and how much she's dedicated to him and how important he is to her, that she provided him with a good luck charm, which was it was a copy of a marriage application or something like that, which was pretty big, because you're like, oh damn, so she has marriage on her mind. Maybe not right now, but she, you know, definitely plans to be with Sakuta and has her sights on Sakuta being her husband at some point. And she provided him that good luck charm there, but Sakuta was like, I'm gonna lose this. Can you hold on to it for me? So at that point, when he's in the world where he's not existing anymore, she found him because she had that good luck charm with their names on it. I'm not sure if she saw Sakuta's name because he wasn't existing at that point, but the marriage proposal, the good luck charm that, you know, meant a lot to both of them and spoke a lot about their relationship, probably triggered it in her mind, like what happened with Sakuta back then, where he remembered all of the things that Mai Sakutajima taught her, and that's how it kind of triggered Mai Sakutajima to pop back up in his head and stuff in the first arc. It was like the same thing there, where seeing this marriage application with both of them and it signifying how strong their relationship is and how much she cares about him, it, you know, popped up Sakuta's existence back up in her head, and, you know, she remembered him, and it was a very nice and sad scene that took place in and stuff, where she remembered him, found him again, and then, you know, they kind of embraced and had a nice, really good moment there with each other. Other things happened too, where she spent the night at Sakuta's, and, you know, he like kind of poured his heart out into speaking about his mother and how he regretted treating her in that way and not being a good son, talking about growing up. That was a topic of conversation, and Mai Sakutajima kind of reaffirming him, letting him know like, hey, like, those things, some of these things are natural because you are growing up, but at the same time too, addressing the problem he had with his mother and not really acknowledging her, or whatever it may have been, pushing the thought of her to the wayside and stuff like that. So that was a big thing. And I loved that moment, you know, where she found him instead of him going out there and finding her. You know, the parallels between the first arc where, you know, she was non-existent, he found her or popped her back up into existence, and the other way around kind of too, where she found him. Things weren't resolved at that point yet. He still needed to resolve things with the mother. So after that stuff happened, he ended up going back to the house to kind of speak over things with the mother, and then she wasn't there. She was at an appointment or something like that at the hospital. So he went over there thinking everything in his head. Everything was so, you know, anxiety driven, and he was very emotional about it and wanted to make up with his mother. She, you know, didn't acknowledge him or didn't know he existed at that point, but he was still there, like watching her and talking about how strong she is and how much she put up with being in the hospital, and how he was so sorry for everything that was going on. And eventually he was going to end up leaving, and it was, you know, a very sad thing. He was like bawling his eyes out at that point. It was very, very emotional of what was going on. And he was like saying that, you know, even if him going there right now doesn't make her acknowledge or see his existence again, he would keep coming back until it does, because he cares about her so much and he is so sorry for everything that did happen and everything. But before he ended up turning back and leaving, she saw him, she acknowledged his existence, and they had a conversation. They were just talking to each other, almost as if like things just didn't turn out that way and they just kind of picked up where they left off or whatever it was. Like she was just like, oh, well, how's this? Or like kind of along those lines or something. Like she didn't know that he was just crying, or didn't like notice like he was just bawling his eyes out or whatever. So that part was a little bit weird, kind of funny or whatever. Like they just kind of started talking normally, but eventually, you know, like things got a lot more emotional, and she was telling him like, thank you for taking care of Kaede. You're such an amazing brother. But yeah, while they were having that conversation and kind of catching up a little bit, you could just feel the emotion behind the description of how Sakuta felt, and how like he was crying and things like that, or and how the mother was feeling too about being gone, and just, you know, how appreciative she was of Sakuta and just things like that. And it turned very, very much so emotional, and they both ended up crying during that whole scene. And the description of it and reading it, like I was almost choking up. Like I was choking up like live on stream. I didn't cry because I like had to like rein myself in, but it was so sad, and I was like pausing a whole bunch because I was like almost about to cry. It was a whole thing. But yeah, it was great to see them kind of reconnect there at the end of the day after all the things. And I think like Kaede walked in the room and they all ended up crying together. So they were like all together, reunited family and stuff. It was very nice after everything that they kind of went through. So that was kind of like the end of that. Another thing that I thought wasn't like super great is I thought there was going to be more of a moment after this point of the mother, seeing the mother like at Sakuta's graduation or something like that. I thought they were going to address the graduation and show him graduating, but they really didn't. They kind of like skipped forward a little bit over to Sakuta's kind of like entrance ceremony to the university that he was going to be going to, which was a little weird. Like I said, I thought they would have put more emphasis on the main character, Sakuta's kind of, you know, graduation. He's graduating from high school. I thought they would have made a little bit more of a big deal out of that. And as well as, you know, the mother being there and kind of showing her in more of like a healthy state, whether it be health wise on her side mentally and healthy wise with the relationship with their family and stuff like that. I thought they were going to show that, but they really didn't. They kind of like skimmed over that, I'd say, or just didn't show that at all. So at that point, you know, Sakuta is going through his entrance ceremony stuff for the Yokohama University. I believe Nadaka is there as well. This is one thing that kind of caught me off guard and that I always forget about in this story, is that Nadaka is in the same grade as Sakuta. It's so weird. It always freaking throws me off. She dyed her hair black too, which was a weird change. We didn't get to see it, but they described it and I was like, what? Nadaka dyed her hair? We've always, you know, known her as the blonde person in this actual show. So once we get to see that at some point, it's going to definitely be a little bit weird, a little bit of a change at that point. I want to see how she looks with the black hair and not the blonde hair at that point. And as well as he ends up running into Ikumi Akagi again. So again, putting these, you know, future characters, setting up plot points, setting up these characters as well into the story who are going to be prevalent in the future. So she was there at the university like entrance ceremony, so she's going to be going to this same university as well. So I can't wait to see what happens with her in the future. And near the very end of the entrance ceremony, Sakuta saw the little Mai Sakurajima pop up again. She was in the crowd running through everybody that was having the entrance ceremony done for them. And at this point, we still hadn't gotten a concrete answer as to what the little Mai Sakurajima actually was. Like I said, they gave us little snippets or little ideas of what she could have been, but nothing for sure in concrete. But this is the moment where I was waiting and I was thinking like, oh, this is probably the moment where we're going to actually get some answers. But nothing really came out of it. She was just running through the crowd, and it's kind of like a mystery as to if the adolescent syndrome was actually resolved or if she was going to pop back up in the future or something like that. Was this her goodbye or whatever it may have been? Or maybe it was some sort of symbolism relating to Sakuta in a way of saying he's on his way to university and this is Sakuta's, you know, child side or something along those lines, going away and kind of showing that he is now going into adulthood and this is his child side leaving. But again, it was very open-ended and it didn't really give us any answers at that point. That's, I believe, pretty much the end of the story, the end of the light novel. But yeah, there's a bunch of different things that happened within it. It was a roller coaster of emotions of like mystery and sadness and just all these different types of plot points that were happening within it. Seeing the mother, seeing how they interacted with each other, the mystery that happened with the scar and the little Mai Sakurajima, all the characters with Ikumi and just all this different stuff, going to the different world and all, like there was just so much that happened within it. It was almost a little bit overwhelming when I was reading it. I was like, man, there's so many things that are happening within this that it's kind of hard to keep up a little bit. But yeah, after reading all of it, it made a lot more sense and it was a great read at the end of the day. I'd probably say at the end of the day, I'd give the light novel probably like, again, like a 9, or because of my enjoyment level in kind of like mulling over in my head of like the mystery of what's going on in the story. It made me think a lot more than it made me in volume 8 or whatever. But like I said, I probably give this one a 9 as well. It would have been a 10 if they probably showed a little bit more of the graduation stuff, the mother being more in a healthy spot, like I said. But yeah, maybe that's just my, I guess, me like expecting too much out of it or whatever. I just thought it would have been a great opportunity for it. Overall, I thought the light novel was great. Like I said, I had my little gripes with it, but still I thought it was amazing nonetheless. Volume 8 as well, both of these light novels, I thought it was a great way to kind of kick off, like I said, the new era of Rascal Does Not Dream light novels and just parts of the story going forward and setting up things for the future. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below on volume 8 and volume 9 if you guys have read them. Make sure to give the video a like if you guys did enjoy it. I greatly appreciate it. It helps me out a ton, helps out the channel, and make sure to hit that subscribe button as well if you have not done so already, and then make sure to hit that notification bell too to get notified for whenever I do upload a video, go live, or do any things like that. But yeah, I hope you all have a fantastic rest of the day, and I will catch you all later. See ya. Bye-bye.